Well, hello everyone. Thomas Montgomery here. We're getting back together for the second part, the second week of the 4-week curriculum, which we call the Free Entrepreneurship Funding Program. So we certainly hope that you have already participated in week one, where we started the discussion about the relevance of businesses and problem solving, but specifically the business plan is what we really worked on last week. And so, as our shared screen says here, a well-developed business plan is crucially important. It tells the lenders who we are, what we do, how much money we want, what we're going to use it for. But I think what's an increasingly important aspect is that it allows us as the business owner to stop and think about what we're doing, what our revenue streams will be, what's it going to cost for us to operationalize, in other words, our expenses, who's our competitors, and so forth. So, again, welcome to week two. We certainly hope that you participated in week one. And what we're going to do now is look at implementing the business plan. All right, so with that being said, there are 4 steps to creating a business, to forming the business, to build the infrastructure. So last week we had the plan. So think about it as we're going to build a house. So we had the architectural drawings that we put together. So we have the plan from week one. Now we're going to need to erect or build the home. And there's 4 components of the business formation as shown on the screen. And this may surprise you a bit what's listed in the order, but we'll go through and make sure we're all on the same page. So we need to have a unique commercial address. Then we need to file with the Secretary of State. Then we need to get our EIN, and we'll talk about each of these in a minute if you're not familiar with any of the terms. Then we're going to open a business bank account. Once we have these 4 items in place, you could argue that we now have the infrastructure of a business to then help make it fundable. If we don't have these 4 items, nothing else will really matter because we need this first. Okay. As mentioned here on this screen, I used to work for the SBA, which is not mentioned on the screen, but so often I would see clients, entrepreneurs that would skip around, people that go get their EIN first and think that they've really accomplished something. But can you imagine having a social security number for a child that has not been born yet? No, you wouldn't. The person comes, the baby comes, then the social security number. So we do need to go in specific order, and we'll talk about each now. And we're going to help you do that. So today we're going to talk about the order, talk about forming a business, and then between now and next session, we're going to help you implement, execute, to do what we're talking about. All right, so reviewing our goals of participation before we dig into the business formation. So when you enrolled and decided to participate in the free entrepreneurship program, we are specifically focused on preparing you to have a business that's fundable, a business that qualifies for funding. Having a business plan from last week is one of the items on the checklist. Having a business formed properly is another item on the checklist. If you're not familiar with what that checklist is, I do want you to be familiar with it so you don't feel like you're walking through the dark, just trying to figure out where we're getting to by feeling around. There is a well thought out plan that we're following. And if you're not familiar with it, you can go to our nonprofit website, 509pacific.org, choose SBA checklist from the menu bar, and you'll see the entire checklist, just for your knowledge. Okay, with that means, of course, if you need us, give us a call. But let's get into the 4 steps of having a business formed properly. Why do we want to do it properly? Because if we follow the rules, then we're going to be able to have a fundable business. Does that mean that if we don't follow all these rules, we could never get funding? No, I wouldn't carry it that far. But if we want to qualify for the best terms, the largest amounts, and so forth, traditional business funding, then this order matters. Now we're going to start breaking down each of these. So we're going to start with the address. Now I'll put the whole screen up here so we can see the address. Now I can tell you from my experience, again, I used to be a SCORE volunteer, was an SBA advisor, taught entrepreneurship at a community college, and of course, I've been involved with a nonprofit for quite some time. This is one that tends to get the least attention, but it's crucial. We need to start. Remember, we had a list of 4 items, and what was number one? The address. So often people want to skip this. If we skip this, then we're going to be in cleanup mode later because all the records everywhere else is going to be off. So the address is very important, even if you hadn't come to today's session with a recognition of that. So let's go on. As it states, most entrepreneurs fail to recognize the importance of the address for their business. Often it is an afterthought, which is kind of what we just said. That is a crucial mistake that can eliminate many funding options, even if all elements are in place. And I've seen this. I've seen clients that didn't follow our guidance on this. They did other things. And then when it came time to go to funding, they literally were declined. They did not get approval for this reason alone. So it's a big deal. Hopefully, you can appreciate that and understand that. So when we talk about an address, of course, a business has to have an address. Now, you could work from where you want. You could work from your back bedroom in pajamas. You could work from the beach in your Speedos. You could be on a cruise ship and be lounging on the main deck. So this is not about the address that you work from. It's about the address on file, the official address of the business. So here we're clarifying you do not have to live in the same city or state even that where the business is. And there's commonly been reasons to form businesses in other states because of privacy reasons, because of taxation reasons, because of other reasons. So often I'll get questions where people don't assimilate that. Let's say that you and I each went out and bought a share of Starbucks. Starbucks, I believe, is in all 50 US states plus across the globe. Well, is that a problem? No, it's okay if you don't live where your business is organized. Secondly, it is crucial. It is crucial that we have a good business address and we need to use it consistently. We're going to get into credit and business credit in the week 3 topic, but business credit is different than personal credit in a number of regards. And just in summary, the address really matters, and we don't want to be using different addresses. We should have an official address, and we need to consistently use that business address. So, as stated here, in short, you need a unique, and I'm going to describe why that's so important and why that's often an issue. But we need a unique commercial address. So that means 2 things specifically. When we say unique, it means that your address is only used by your business. Let's break down what an address has. So an address usually has a street number, like 123, and then a street name, like Main Street, and then a city, state, and zip. Also, often, not always, often business addresses have a suite number. When we're talking about unique, we need to be the only business using that suite number. It should not be a shared suite number. That can become a problem in some cases because if you look at Regis or WeWork or some of these shared office spaces, they make it really easy and affordably to get quote unquote an office address. But if it is a shared office address, a shared suite number, it is not going to be seen as credible. It's going to be a problem. So we want a unique address, meaning that it's not shared. And then when we get into the second word, commercial, all addresses are categorized by the United States Postal Service. And so we can't game the system. We can't take the back bedroom, call it Suite B, and think the rest of the world sees our back bedroom as a commercial address. If the street address is categorized as a residential address or a mail center or a post office, then we're not going to be able to game the system. There's no gaming the system. So we need a commercial address that's not a residential address. It's not a post office box. Now that opens up the conversation. Well, can it be virtual? Sure, sure. Because what is virtual? I mean, virtual could be you could have a 10,000 square foot office in Trump Tower in Manhattan, but maybe you work virtually from Miami Beach. So virtual is fine because that's irrelevant, but it needs to be unique and it needs to be commercial. So going on. So that's simple enough, right? Well, it gets more complicated. So it's not just having an address that's unique and commercial. We're going to need, as stated here, a written lease. Many to most lenders now are going to ask for a copy of the lease. So we can't just fudge it. We need a copy of the lease. The lease needs to be in the name of the business that's applying for funding. I commonly see where someone will say, well, I have another company and it has a building. I'll just use it. Well, do we have a lease for the company that we're trying to get money for, trying to raise capital, get a loan for, that matches that address? So we need a written lease for the right business at the right address. Now, there are some other contractual elements that are important and typically required by lenders now. So again, you can see this is much more than just an address. There's some nuances that make some difference. So this one you may have to sit down on, but many lenders, including the SBA, require the lease to be the same term, same duration as the repayment term of the loan. And I can give you some reason why. So let's say that you were to go buy a house. So we're away from business for a second for the example, but you're going to go buy a home. And then when you buy a home for your family to live in, there's going to be typically a mortgage, and that mortgage has a lien against the home. So if you didn't continue to pay for the mortgage, then they could foreclose on the home, right? Not a good thing. Hopefully you don't go through that, but that makes sense. Well, for business loans, they're typically, if it's a larger loan, the lender is going to put a lien against the business's assets. And that doesn't mean anything negative. It just means that they're protecting their rights to recover from the assets of the business in case the business doesn't repay the loan. It's normal. It's not a bad thing. It's normal. It's okay. But if the lease doesn't exist anymore. So let's say that we go get a 10-year SBA loan and our lease is for 1 year. Well, the lease is over in a year. So then the lender would have exposure for years 2 through 10. Lenders don't want that. So one element of the lease is that it needs to match. It needs to be at least as long as the repayment term of the loan. And then secondly, there's some legal language that I'll spare you from, but essentially it needs to have language that says that the landlord is willing to be second in priority in case of default to the lender. The lender needs to be priority. So with that being said, it's actually rather complicated to have a lease that meets those standards. However, we realize that that's often a barrier, and we can get you a lease for a free, unique commercial business address to use. So we'll fill this need because it is so complicated, and often it's something that you might not be able to meet otherwise. We'll take care of that for you. It's one of the perks of going through the program. Okay, so that's the address. So we said that there's 4 elements of forming a business. The address was one of the 4. It was the most complicated. The others will move pretty quickly. So let's move on down to the others. Next, we need to file with the Secretary of State. So dependent upon the location of your business address, that normally dictates which Secretary of State, which state we're going to file with. And so we need to file. Now, there's different types of entities. You might have heard of LLCs, C Corps, S Corps, even nonprofit organizations, which are technically nonprofit corporations, but people don't think about it that way. So there's different options. Frankly, any of them can work. They each have their own pros and cons that really need to be addressed on an individual basis. And so we can visit with you one-on-one, but it really comes down to strategic preferences and taxation preferences. So we're not going to come here for the training, and we have, 220 of you on today's session. So it's not about, well, all 220 of you need to do one thing. That's not a very accurate or objective approach. We'll be visiting with you between today's session and the next session to help you have some guidance. But the truth is, any of these can pursue funding. However, not all funding sources are available to all entity structures. So we need to look at the strategy, which we should be able to discern from the business plan, which was in week 1, and then look at taxation differences. Lastly, and these are kind of combined, we need to get ourselves an EIN and then a bank account, and that completes the 4 steps of business formation. So it says, once you have your business address and business entity formed, it's time to obtain your EIN. Sometimes you see that referred to as a TIN, taxpayer identification number, but it's a unique number that it's like the social security number is to a person and EIN is to a business. There are services that will charge you to get an EIN, and I don't want to discredit anyone's services, but I've never found that there's value in that. It's very easy and it's free to get the EIN directly from the IRS, and we can help you with this, so that's not a problem. Here's the specific link to go to. Be careful if you just do a search, like a Google search, you may be routed to a paid sponsor that's offering to do the same thing, but at a fee. And the same thing at a fee, but it's so basic and it's so direct. I'm not sure that there's a value in doing that. So in other words, you can do it yourself. We can help you. I don't think you should pay anyone to do it unless I'm missing something. Once we have the address, the entity filed with the Secretary of State, and the EIN, then our final step is to open a business bank account. Yes, we need a business bank account. Which bank do we want to work with? That's your preference. But we definitely need to have a business bank account to keep our business money separate from our personal money. And even if you have other businesses, each business should be separate from a record-keeping, tax-keeping perspective. So again, as stated here in bold, we'll help you implement. Today's session was to increase your financial literacy, your understanding of what does it take to get a business formed. We've covered and we understand that there's 4 elements. It starts with an address that's commonly overlooked. We shouldn't, because if we start with a bad address, then we're going to be in cleanup mode with all these other steps later. Don't want to do that. Start with a good address, then file with Secretary of State. Our grant will cover that for you if you want. Then we need to get our EIN. We can help you with that if you want. And then we need to open a business bank account. So if you have questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to us. 903-352-3390 is a phone number for our 501c3 nonprofit called 509 Pacific. And then between now and next week, we need to go ahead and apply to execute, to do what we've learned. So we have these 4 elements done. And there's no reason that we can't have these 4 elements all done before next week's class, week 3. So with that being said, if you need anything, let us know. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to working with you again soon. Bye-bye.